So hello, friends. It's Saturday morning, just after 9 o'clock here in Thailand, Thai time, and it's evening time in the U.S. Um, Today, we're going to talk about something curious, interesting, exciting even, and it's the same old thing that I keep talking about every time. So, what we're going to be talking about today is the difference between ordinary mind and noble mind. Before I do that, I would like to clear up a couple of items of confusion. One confusion is about the life of the Buddha. It got started someplace, I'm not sure where. There is a sutta in the Dinga Nikaya, I think it's number 13, but I'm not sure, where the Buddha discusses with Ananda, a prior Buddha in an earlier time, who went out and saw old age, sickness, death, and a monk. And somehow or another, that sutta of a story that the Buddha told got transferred on to him, as well as a whole lot of stupid justifications. And the most stupid justification is, he was cloistered by his father. He was afraid that the Buddha, or Gautama at the time, would become a monk, and he didn't want that to happen. Well, the point is that he could have not been kept silent and quiet in his room or in the palace. That would have made him a monk. That in fact, it's well known that he had a number of skills that would be the skills taught to a prince. He was an archer, he was a horseman, and he was especially an elephanteer. And he spent time in training of that. Um, and that the story then goes is that once he went out and saw old age, sickness, death, and a monk, he decided then to become a monk and left home, leaving his infant child and mom. And all the Westerners, especially the feminists, they get all up in the air about that. They don't like that he left his wife, not understanding that she too was a princess. That in fact his wife was chosen, uh, just like royal families are chosen. That his wife was in fact a princess in a kingdom that was nearby, and that she had everything. There was no such thing then as child support, nor in that situation was there any reason to. But the Buddha didn't leave the home in the night, secretly stashing away. Then, in fact, he said goodbye to his mother and father, and that 5 people went with him, including Chanda, his horse groom, and his horse. So he took it was a retinue. He went very princely out. He did not go out. He went out wandering, but there was a reason for it. And the reason is that he was a member of a council of 20 Sakyans who were the ruling class. And you could say that it's something like the House of Representatives or the legislature or something like that, except that they had a rule, and that is that once the group decided upon something, then everyone in the group had to commit to it, no exceptions. Well, the story goes is that there was a flood, and in the flood, the course of the river changed, and the change of the river meant that the land became subject to who owns that land. Did the original owners of the land continue to own the land, or was the land newly transferred because the river was changed? And the Sakyans were all hot about this, and they wanted to go to war. And Gautama voted against having a war, but he was the only one. Everybody else wanted a war. So that means that he was committed to go to battle. And he chose not to, except that he only had 3 possible choices. One was to go along to get along. The other one would be like Socrates, to be executed or to be exiled. So, unlike Socrates, who chose not to be exiled, in other words, he was given the same kind of situation that Socrates was given. You either shut up and go along to get along, or you drink the poison, or you take a hike. And so he chose to take a hike. I'm glad he did. So his wife was asleep, and he chose not to wake her up because he didn't want to have a fight about it. But that helps, I think, a lot of people clear up the problem that they have about him abandoning his family, that in fact he didn't abandon the family. And there's also later, after he sat under the Bodhi tree and figured out what he needed and came back as the Buddha, when his wife saw him coming, she told her son, who was now at the age of 6 or 7, to she said something really snarky. She said, "Go, there is your father coming. Go and get your inheritance from him." That was the wrong thing for her to say. Why? Because that's exactly what the Buddha did. He gave his son his inheritance. And what was that? In the form of a robe and a bowl. And he went out at that age. So the wife then lost her son, because her son went with the Buddha and stayed with the Sangha. So that little story, I think, will help everybody to understand that it's not a feminine issue or feminist issue that he abandoned his family. Does anybody have any questions upon that before we go to the next one? Nobody's got anything to say, huh? Christina, aren't you really pissed off that the Buddha left home and left his infant child?
Dhammarato, I have something to say.
All right, Karwan, I'll hear you.
So the first time when he went outside of his palace or his city, the place where they had made for him, so it was not with the intention to go for the spiritual search.
Well, if he had gone in rags, or had gone, there's actually another story. Mahamogala was in also robes, but he was in very, this is later, he was in very, very fine robes. And when he met the Buddha, he says, "Please swap robes with me, for you're the one who needs this very fine robe, and I'll take the worn out one that you're wearing now." Well, robes didn't last very long back then. I mean, it was monsoon, and that cotton doesn't last in monsoons very well. And so we don't know what he wore when he left the palace, but we do know that when he did leave, it was a royal entourage. That, in fact, one of the people who went with him was his lifelong teacher, Kandana. And so Chana and Kandana were 2 of his support. I've forgotten the others' names, but they did stay with him all throughout his journeys. So you could say that he didn't go out as a mendicant. He just was in exile, and he was just looking for something to do. He did, in fact, set the horse free and cut his hair. That's also part of the story. But he didn't abandon and go into seclusion. He kept his 5 friends with him. And so those stories about him abandoning his wife to go off searching for some cure for a spiritual disease is not true. He left home out of political necessity.
So was done by accident, basically, that he came in contact or went searching for the spiritual and Dhamma.
Oh, did you come to the Dhamma accidentally? I guess we could say that that's the only way that you can come to it. All right, any other questions? So let's continue on. Another very interesting point is, especially in the West, and I think this really has to do with Ajahn Chah and his group of Western monks, is for some reason they have mistaken the Pali words jata rupa rajatang for the word money. And yet, the easy way to see it is that if Thailand was a Buddhist country supported by the government, and that the monks were not allowed to handle any money at all, wouldn't it be likely that the monks can travel for free? But in fact, oh no, they get a half-price discount. Actually, it's a child's fare that they travel on, which means that they do have to pay money by government regulations. Now, what in the Vinaya, what it does say is that the jata rupa is actually hoarding of wealth in the sense of bullion. Jata rupa actually is generally referred to as silver, but it's also just any kind of precious metal. And rajatang, raja means the king's gold or precious metal, and that is almost always bullion. That coins in the time of the Buddha were made out of copper, and also some coins were made out of wood, wooden nickels, you know. So, there in the time of the Buddha, the monks did have money, did get some money, get gifts of little money, and that they would give it to a banker. His name was an Anthropedica, who was living in Varanasi, and he was a banker, and so he took care of the finances for the monks. So if a monk broke his bowl or came into needing some money for some reason, he would write a piece of paper requesting the item, and either the money was given to the messenger or the messenger would buy the item for the monk and bring it back. So we're talking about little money. In the Vinaya, not only was it hoarded gold or bullion that was disallowed, also land ownership, animal, cattle, horses, sheep, chickens, no servants, and no slaves. So these are items that the monks don't need because those are items of wealth that if you lost any of those things, you'd feel bad. But a few coins here and there, you're not going to miss that. So this is another item that is wrongly understood. In fact, I have seen some monks, Western monks, really get uptight and make rules about it, where in fact there was no problem at all, especially about travel. That in the time of the Buddha, even though they had 2 forms of transportation, one would be an ox cart and the other one would be a boat. but often the boatmen would require passage money. So when the monks were traveling around and would go across the river by boat, and by the way, there was a lot of rivers around, then they would have to pay some small fee for riding on the boat. Hello, Ivan. Glad to see you. So,
Glad to see you.
that's something that I wanted to make sure that everybody could understand, because the entire teachings of the Buddha have to do with stop making so many rules and start living wisely in the present moment. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about monks and money? One last example. In Thailand, there is a tradition that you give money to the monks on one's birthday. And that the way that it goes is that every year, whatever age you are, you give that much in Thai baht. And I found that out. I was at Wat Chulapatan, and here I come up with a little packet of coins that amounted to 47 baht. And one of the senior monks says, "Oh, that means then that this guy had his 47th birthday, and he goes and gives 47 baht to each of 47 monks for his birthday." 47 baht, that's, Mikey, translate. What is that? That's $1, $1.50. Turn your mic on.
Enough for a very cheap meal, we'll say.
Yeah, enough for a cheap meal. Okay, so those are two things that we can look at. I would like to look at another one, and this will take a little bit of time, and that is that most Westerners think that the Buddha taught rebirth, reincarnation, to where in fact he did not at all, but that you could see that some sutras were dict with, and the question would be, in what way? Now, many of you have heard the story of the 3 watches of the night, to where the Buddha sat all night long, and in the first watch of the night, he looks at all of his past lives. How many of you have heard this story? Ben, I'm sure you have. Ivan, you've heard the story, right? Okay. Now, one of the points about it is that in that first watch of the night, he could see up to 100,000 past lifetimes. Wow, 100,000 past lifetimes. This has got to be a metaphor, in the sense that if you spent just 1 minute with each past life, that would take 69 days, not 4 hours. And even if you spent just 1 second, which is not enough, that would still be 27 hours, not 4. And so obviously the number 100,000 has a different context, a different meaning. Now, how many of you have spent a lot of time in India? The Indian languages use the word lakh for 100,000 as if that's their biggest number. But in fact, I have actually heard them say lakh, which means 100,000, which is 10 billion. That's the way that they count. And they've always, in the Indian languages, have counted that way. And so we're just talking about a large number, as high as you can count. Now, what's really going on there is that if you're sitting very quietly with the mind sharp and focused, you can begin to see that you make stuff up. Every thought that you make up could be a lifetime. And you can have a thought once every second or so. And so maybe even faster than that. So these thoughts that we have was what the Buddha was actually looking at. He was looking at that the mind is constantly changing. Now, the second watch of the night, it talks about the coming and going of beings. Now, what that actually means is that he was refining his investigation to see not only the arising, but also the passing away of the thoughts. And so a thought comes and it dies, and a thought comes and it dies, and a thought comes and then another thought comes and the first one dies away. This is what that actually means. And it can be seen when the mind is sharp, focused, relaxed, and you're actually paying attention not to what the thoughts are themselves, but the process of thought making. And so in the third watch of the night, that's, by the way, when morning time comes, we shine a light on it. And he saw then the third watch of the night was that we can see right through that stuff, and we can see then how to come out of it. And how to come out of it, or the way to understand it, is by noticing that some thoughts are painful, some thoughts are unwholesome, and that they die out, they die away. But when they do die away, that's freedom. In other words, he understood through that third watch of the night the Four Noble Truths and how it's practiced right here, right now. Now, there's two associations with this process that I'm talking about of the three watches of the night. The first one is the teaching of Paticca Samuppada. Now, the Paticca Samuppada has this perception, or Namarupa in the Pali, or Sanya, which is the process of making up thoughts. This also refers to that when the mind is really, really soft and pliant, and you're really paying attention to what the mind's doing, this would be called the fourth jhana. In other words, you can see what's going on in the mind. Now, before you heard me talk about that in the actual practice, just like a three-step process to actually four altogether. One would be ordinary people, don't have a clue. And then there are those who were introduced to the Dhamma, but they haven't successfully been able to practice well yet. They're still working with it. And then you have the next group, which would be called the stream enterers or the Sotapan. And then you would have the ones who were accomplished, the Arahat. Now, there's a major difference between the Sotapan and the Arahat, and that is that the Sotapan has to continuously remind himself to be in the present moment, to where the Arahat has already developed that habit. That's basically the only difference. There's not much difference between the Sotapan and the Arahat, and both are considered noble. So, in this idea then of jhana, we can think of the first jhana is when we remove the hindrances, but the mind is still active, it's still working, it's still having thought. But when we begin to investigate the thoughts themselves, and we can only do that when the mind is quiet, that would be the fourth jhana. Now, what I'm actually saying is that the second and the third jhana are hardly ever mentioned. They don't even mean much of anything. That, in fact, a good practitioner is going to go from the first jhana right into the fourth jhana. The second jhana's hallmark, by the way, is a very big wow feeling. This is really great, but that doesn't last very long. And then the third jhana is when feelings subside and thought subsides, so that we can actually look at the process itself. And then we have the fourth jhana, which is getting the mind stable enough to where we can actually see this stuff. This is not rocket science. This is not way over the moon. This is available to each and every one of you if you just merely practice. It's not magical. Now, one of the statements about this fourth jhana is that it said that if you can do the fourth jhana, when you come out of it, you can see your past lives. Now, what people automatically do when they think of past lives, they're thinking about something that happened 400 or 500 years ago. You're in a different body with a different name and all of that kind of stuff. To where what we're really talking about, your past lives, is the thought process. Each thought would be a completely different lifetime, either this self or that self or no self at all. So I would like to clear up one more thing. There have been people, Westerners, who go around as if they think they know what they're talking about in this fourth jhana, calling it 8 jhanas. How many of you have heard 8 jhanas? Anybody heard of 8 jhanas before? You all can't see because you got your mic or your video off. Mikey, you know that there's commonly referred to as 8 jhanas, right? Lee Brassington is the one who advertises 8 jhanas. All right. So he's talking about the 4 jhanas that are already there. And then there are states that one can get into, and he calls them separate jhanas, but they're not because they're intermixed. Now, one of them is when we separate sense consciousness with perception. And that breaking the two of them apart is what the fourth jhana is all about. Normally, when we see something, we think about it and we tell a story. But when the mind is really quiet, you can have sensual input, and that sensual input then doesn't necessarily, or in fact at all, lead to a story. Now, when that separation is done, this is called that the boundary between perception and consciousness has relaxed. Now, some translators, not knowing at all what they're talking about, will use the word infinite rather than the boundary is gone. So the boundless then means to them infinite. Obviously, any translator who is translating the Pali and uses the word infinite has never taken a graduate math course in numerical analysis about what numbers really are and how they're represented. So it's just simple ignorance. There is really no such thing other than a concept of zero, which got mixed in with division by zero. And if you divide something by smaller and smaller pieces, that gives a bigger and bigger result. So that's not infinite. There is no such thing as infinity. We just have very large numbers, uncountable numbers. But it's absolutely incorrect to talk about it in the sense of infinite consciousness, because the Buddha in Sutta number 38 and the Mahatanha Vibhanga Sutta talks about consciousness itself is dependently arising. It depends upon what the eye sees and the eye itself and the form that it sees, or more specifically, when one is being very quiet, being very still with the eyes closed, there's no sound much around, then we begin to pay very close attention to the body. This gives rise to that the body itself has 2 sensory systems. One is proprioceptic, where you know the position of the body, but also on the skin level, there are neurons. And these neurons are so active, there's so many of them firing so often that it is hard to tell where the boundary of the body stops and where for instance, if you're laying in bed, where the bed begins and where the body stops, or where the covers begin and the body stops, or if you're laying without covers, just the air. Where is the air touching the body? This has been badly translated as infinite space, to where really it's talking about lack of being able to see the boundaries of the body. But as we're looking, we begin to see the whole body as something shimmering, something completely alive, something boundless, that you can't see where the real boundaries are, and that in the description of the fourth jhana, there's actually an analogy where imagine that your whole body is draped with a white shimmering sheet. This is that whole state, that the body is completely covered with sense neurons, and that the whole body then is part of this practice. And so this is what we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to the body, and there's not a lot to talk about. We don't think about feet as feet because it's all just part of the body. There's no boundaries there, but you can feel the whole body. So as we do this, we can begin to see that we're conscious of the body, but we're not having thoughts about the body. We're just looking at the body. So we can talk about perception in the sense of this conversation that we have about our sensual input when the mind is in an ordinary state, as opposed to the mind being a very refined state like this. And so we have the two that I mentioned is boundless consciousness, where the mind, the consciousness, sense consciousness, is not bound to perception, and also this sense of body as having no boundaries to it. Then the next one would be what we call neither perception nor non-perception, and that is meaning that you can perceive just enough to perceive that you're perceiving consciousness itself. And then the next one is perceiving nothing. Well, perceiving nothing, that's just another story. And that's the 8. We have the first 4 jhanas. It's kind of funny in this system where they talk about 8, they kind of completely miss out on what is the 4th jhana, because they want to take the features and the parts of the 4th jhana and break them into extra jhanas. But there's more to the story than that. And that is, in fact, if you look at the sutta number 111, one by one as they occur in the Majjhima Nikaya, you'll find, in fact, in Lee Brassington's method of calculation, that there are 9, because there's another level. And that last level would be when perception stops. Now, when perception stops, so do feelings. There's no more feelings left when perception stops. Now, there's a major difference between perception of nothing or perception of nothingness, that's a perception, versus when perception itself stops. Now, this system that we're talking about allows one to really see deeply into the nature of the mind, how it works, and comes up with making stories all the time. These stories, then, are each of those lives that we have, the comings and goings of the mind, not the comings and goings of beings. Well, you've heard me talk about the point that it's the first jhana that we really need to practice. We need to get it going. We need to, in fact, the hallmark of the first jhana is removal of the hindrances. Now, I define hindrances as any thought or any perception or any story that we make that prevents us or hinders us from being able to see reality be able to see things the way that they really are. In other words, how the mind works. So, possibly an example of that is that if you went to a music concert and they've got these great big speakers and they've got these sound systems and they've got a roadie who's operating the all of the dials and things like this, and when the audience is in the concert, they're paying attention to the music. They're listening to all of that boom, 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 and rattle, rattle, rattle that the musicians are putting out, and they're not paying attention to the speakers themselves. Only an engineer in the audience would be more interested in the speakers and the amplifier and the microphones. And then he's really not interested at all in the music that's being played. He's interested in the process of making the music. This is what we would then mean is that you become an engineer to start looking at the process of how your mind works rather than the noise that it creates. So there's 9 jhanas, not 8. And that last jhana, which is nothing more than just the completion of stopping the noise so that you can inspect the gear. Why should you be? In fact, it's really difficult to inspect a speaker very closely while it's booming. You need to turn the speakers off. You need to disconnect the microphones and test them separately. So this is the way that we would understand that we're going to investigate the mind, and we can only do that in this present moment when the mind is really soft, very subtle, very easygoing, and is not busy. That in fact, going back to that part about the 100,000 lives, wouldn't that be pretty busy? Mr. Ben, wouldn't that be really, really busy is to try to keep track of 100,000 lives?
Yeah,
Can you even
especially in
try to
4
keep track
hours.
of your thoughts? No, we can't
That is
keep track of them. So that whole idea of past lives needs to be revisited into the quality of what's happening in this present moment. And the Buddha did not teach rebirth. He did not teach reincarnation. He taught one thing, and that is to see the dukkha, see the unwholesome, see the hindrances in the mind right here now, and then remove them and become free from them right here, right now. In that regard, the whole teaching of the Buddha is a sudden enlightenment. And then you get dark again, and then a sudden enlightenment over and over and over again until you practice it to where it comes often. Let us say that there was a drum in the attic, and you went up into the attic and you saw this old drum, and so you played it for a second, and then you left the attic and left that drum there. It's not getting beaten anymore. And then maybe 3 or 4 years later, you go up into the attic and you see that drum and you beat on it again and it's making the sound again. But you're not going to learn to become a drummer. And this is the way that most people practice Anapanasati and the Eightfold Noble Path is by doing it very intermittently, as opposed to steadily banging on it over and over and over again. Keep coming back, keep looking, keep seeing those images in the mind, and doing this over and over and over again. It doesn't require a particular posture, doesn't require a particular room or a meditation hall or a retreat center or anything like that, because wherever you go, you take that mind and the body with you. You take your breath with you. So any time is good time to start practicing. So this is what the real teachings of the Buddha are, not about planning, not about contemplation, or any of that kind of stuff, but it's practicing being in a really, really good state, very soft, very comfortable, very relaxed, and very sharp. That in fact, if you look at the 5 hindrances, you can in fact see there's 2 of them called, I've forgotten the Pali word right now, forgive me, called sloth and torpor. And sloth and torpor, by the way, is eliminated. And normally the reason that we'll have sloth or torpor, and you can call that in fact tiredness, is because we're too busy thinking. We're too busy making a bunch of stories up. We're too busy processing data. And it's the processing of the data, not the data itself, that is the problem. So when we stop processing the data and just let the data be, then we can become really, really relaxed. Imagine a girl is standing at the fence and she's got thousands of ducks, and she's there, got the gate open, and there are thousands of ducks rushing by her. If she just stands there and lets the ducks rush by her, she can look and see the ducks. She recognizes some of them, and some of them she doesn't. But that's completely different than her trying to catch every duck that comes through that gate. That's pretty tiring, isn't it, Ben? So if you keep thinking that you got to catch those thoughts, that's not the right way to practice. The way to practice is to get yourself into such a calm, easy, gentle state that you can actually see those thoughts as they come by. And as they do, you can begin to narrow the gate just a little, just narrow that gate so that you can begin to slow things down and make it really easy. This is the 4th jhana. It's nothing magical, and nothing magical happens there unless you want to redefine the word magic, because in a special kind of way, this is magic. Why? Because it's freedom. You can see the way that things really are, and that's magical in a way, not in the sense of storytelling. That in fact almost all the religions are just a bunch of stories that are told, and you're not supposed to examine those stories the way that I just examined the first watch of the night just a few minutes ago. If you examine that story, if you investigate the story, guess what? The stories all fall apart. They're all made up. And that's the real magic. The real magic, as you can see, the sleight of hand. One last example of that is that when I went to visit Satya Sai Baba in Bangalore, I was on the train, and an Indian woman and I made friends with each other, and she invited me to her house for supper after we got off the train. And there she took out some old newspapers showing a complete set of photographs. It was page after page after page of photographs in a newspaper of showing people who had taken cameras into the magic that Satya Sai Baba was doing. And there was a great expo in the Bangalore newspaper. You could see that all he was doing was sleight of hand magic. He would, let us say, he would manifest Rolex watches. He would manifest diamonds. They would come out of thin air. Another one that he commonly did was make holy ash appear magically. But really what he was doing is he was just taking ash and balling it up in tiny little balls about the size of a grain of rice, and put them inside his fingers and holding them there. And so when it was time to do the holy ash, he would take and rub his hands, and poof, and all of this holy ash would be falling on the crowd, and everybody was, oh, marvelous, oh, how wonderful. And so I'm redefining magic in the sense of, instead of being awed by the sleight of hand, the real magic is seeing through that magic. to see really what's going on. And this is where the mind needs to be completely free from hindrances. Whew, wow. Does anybody have any questions now about this? RJ, go ahead.
Oh no, I just turned on my video. I didn't have a question. I didn't have a question.
You don't have a question.
No.
Nobody's got any questions. Come on, today I have completely destroyed some of the most fundamental beliefs that you've got. How can you just let me be without questioning?
I have a question. I have huge hindrance.
Can you speak up a bit, Anna?
I have a question. I have a huge hindrance, how you pronounce it. So I have a pain in my stomach, and every time I sit meditate, something gets stressed and I get pain in the stomach. So I'm sitting for 2 months with a pain in the stomach. How
Yeah,
I can
so my
sit through it?
question
How
would
I
be,
can
why
sit
would
through
you
it?
sit in pain? How can
I'm
you
not
be
sitting
really
in pain.
relaxed and comfortable?
I don't know. So how I can break through this?
Yes, so any technique or any teacher who is saying you've got to sit for a long time is missing the point completely. This doesn't take any time. What it really takes is getting the mind in a very quiet, easy place. And if you've got body pain, that's not being comfortable. You need to be completely free from any of the feelings of fear, discomfort, any of that, and get yourself into a state of easygoing satisfaction. That's actually part of the first jhana. You've got to be free from the hindrances. And if you've got body pain, that's a hindrance. If you call it pain, if you call it, oh, there's just a sensation of throbbing in the leg, if there's just a sensation, excuse me, a sharp piercing sensation in the calf, then that's just a sharp piercing sensation. Oh, I see that. But when we call it pain, that adds, I don't like it. And so if you don't like it, that's a hindrance to you being in a really good, happy, comfortable state. You're not satisfied at all if you call it pain. So I would highly recommend that if you're in pain, do something to get out of the pain so that then you can practice happily. Don't sit in pain. Adjust the body. No need to sit in pain.
It's
And
a
I'm glad that
stomach
you
pain.
mentioned that because a lot of students have the Western mentality of no pain, no gain. The answer is that when there is pain, there is no gain. You had one more question, Anna?
It's a stomach pain. So only thing I can do is stop meditating.
I would congratulate you if you would stop meditating if meditating is getting you pain. And I would highly also congratulate you for coming out of that pain and being happy out of that pain. Don't put yourself into pain. That's ridiculous. That's not what the Buddha taught. He taught Dukkha Nirodha. He didn't teach pain and more pain and gain and oh, you got to sit and you got to fart and you got to fight and you got to get tired and you got to, all of that kind of stuff is what Western meditation practice is. And it's missing the most important points. The most important point is taking the right effort to make things really easy. So if there is fear, take the right effort to remove the fear. Everything is okay, not a worry in the world. If you've got fear, you can't practice correctly. The correct practice is the removal of the fear, removal of the pain, removal of anything that prevents you from being in a really marvelous, quiet, easy, beautiful state. And that state is available to everyone. Everybody's been in that state, but you didn't know how to control it. Now you know how to control it, manipulate it. So does anybody have any further questions? Ivan, you had a question. Can
No
you read that?
question.
Huh?
I mean, no question after hearing what you said. So,
All right. Well, let's hear the question that you had before we started the talk.
I think, yeah, you addressed the contemplation part, but I think I missed some of it. I have to re-listen. But I think
Can you read
perhaps
the question that you had? You had it on the Discord. You had 3 questions. What was the
like,
first question?
so yeah, measuring progress is not supramundane. Contemplating is not supramundane. And wait, what's the other one? Planning, yeah, planning is not supramundane. Yeah.
So you've already gotten the answers to those questions. All right. So making progress is not the teachings of the Buddha. And yet people talk about making progress here, that, and the other thing. This is not like a rheostat. This is not like a fan or a light that is on a rheostat or a resistor so that as you turn it up, the light gets brighter and brighter. No, this is not like that. This is an on-off switch. And when you've got that switch turned on, wow, the light is there, everything is wonderful. And when you got that light switch switched off, then you start asking questions, how's my progress? And there's no progress when you're asking if you got progress. But if you stop asking having progress and start just feeling good, that's not progress. That's immediate result. Does that make sense? Mr. Potato, does that make sense?
So,
What else?
Dhammarato, I was thinking
Go ahead, RJ.
about the physical pain. So, what would be the right thing to do if there is pain in some part of the body? What should the person do then?
Well, it depends upon what the pain is. That in fact, if you've got neck pain, maybe the right thing to do is to get your shoulders rubbed. Get a little bit of massage. You don't have to go out to a masseur to do that. You can just massage right where you are.
Mhm.
Okay. If you've got a headache, that's probably because you're overthinking. So stop thinking about stuff and the headache will go away. If you've got anxiety, almost always anxiety is felt in the chest, and anxiety is another word for adrenaline and cortisol that you've worked yourself up into fear. You've got fear and anxiety. The right thing to do with that is to take a few deep breaths and say, wow, I can get rid of this feeling easily enough. If you've got sharp sensations in the body, let us say leg cramps, then one of the things you can do is put some pressure on the bottom of the foot. Stand up, in fact. If you've got leg pain, cramps in the bed, if you sit up on the side of the bed and push the leg down, that will relieve that tension in the leg. So there's a lot of things to do. The Buddha was actually quite big on just enough medicine. So do the medicine that you need to do to get the body in an okay state. And pretty soon, after you practice for a while, you can begin to recognize that you can apply that medicine right out of your mind. Oh, the leg is in a cramp. Okay, I can handle that. Let me look at cramp for a little bit. That's all right. And the surprise is that the cramp will go away. You can do some movements around, move around your ankles, etc., like that. So there's all kinds of pain, some of which does not go away because it's cancer. Now, when I was a student of such things, one of the phrases that was used is, when people have cancer, that means that they're eating themselves alive. But that's too simplistic, because, in fact, what that actually is that there are things in the atmosphere that are carcinogenic. Things like asbestos or smoking or whatever like that. So often, to get rid of smoker's cough, you got to get away from smoking. Also, if you're a coal miner and you've got coal miner's black lung disease, the right cure for that is to get out of that coal mine. And then at the end of it all, why don't we just, when the pain gets too much and we're just completely racked with pain and we can't do anything about it, can't we just die happily? Wow, I'm really glad to be out of here. Let me leave this body behind. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. But the one thing that I highly recommend you do not do is put up with the pain. You hear me, Anna? Don't put up with the pain. You can sit and meditate until the pain comes, and you say, okay, time to quit meditation right now. I'm going to go have a beer. Or maybe a soda. Up to you.
So last week I told that I started observing my body, and I noticed that my legs, I could feel anxiety. And this week I tried some different things, like tightening and loosening them, or doing a little bit of exercise actually helped. So I think that is in line with what you told. That made it better. So I don't have that problem.
Yes, you never did have it as a problem. You just had it and you made it into a problem. Can you see the problem-making process? Oh, I don't like the body's sensations.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was there.
All right,
So it would be
Karwan.
right this.
Do you have something to say, Karwan?
Nothing to say, Dhammarato.
How about you, Navid? You got something to say?
Sorry, I came a little bit late, Dhammarato, but so first jhana, huh? That's what I have to really pay attention
Yeah,
to.
get yourself free from those hindrances. That's the important point. It's right here, right now, freedom from the hindrances. Have wholesome thoughts, happy thoughts, everything is okay kind of thoughts. Stop having those, oh, poor me kind of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Stop working. Be happy. Be easygoing. That's the first jhana. And when the first jhana gets really, really deep, you can just call that first jhana the really deep one. You can call that fourth jhana if you want to. I don't care. But the important point is can you see when you're making shit up? Can you see that you're making up those problems and stop making up those problems? Okie dokie. You got something to say?
No, Dhammarato, thank you. I'm clear.
How about you, Tim?
It was a nice talk. No, I've got nothing to say.
Fatal being. We've been talking about some really, let's say, advanced stuff. I dare not say the word deep. So, do you have something to say about what you've heard?
No, I don't have anything to say. I joined a little bit late.
All right. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, no, nothing to add. No questions at this point, but yeah, thanks a lot for the teaching. Enjoyed listening.
Potato. Let me hear it, man. Must be taking a toilet break. So, Christina, where's Harold?
I know. I was curious if he had anything to add about the part about the jhanas, because we've talked about the 4 jhanas, and that was an interesting part again.
Yeah, get yourself into a really, really good state. And the gooder it gets, the more quiet, the more stable, the more investigative it can be, so that you can begin to see that almost all your problems, you made that shit up. And so when you start removing perception, you stop the stories. And the stories is what makes us feel bad, not reality. You made that shit up, and then you feel bad about the story that you made up. So stop making up stories. But you got to see the storytelling manufacturing process.
Yeah.
And when you see it, then you can say, I see you. I see that.
Thank you.
So who else? I guess that's about it. Ivan, do you have something left to say?
Generally, no. I just want to re-listen to this later. Looking forward to listen to it again. Yeah.
So, anybody got any last things to say?
I can ask a question. There is like this thing about Leigh Brassington. He talks about like PT, that the thoughts, when the 4 hindrances go away, that's called like access concentration. That's like not jhana. But when you experience PT, then it's
Concentration
jhana.
is not in the sutras. Some monk 100, maybe 1,000 years after the Buddha made that shit up. It's got 2 problems. One is access and the other one is concentration. Both of them are wrong. But a better way of looking at it is that you're on the verge of first jhana simply because you've gotten the hindrances very, very weak. And when you remove them completely, that's an aspect of first jhana.
Okay, so PT is not required for jhana, only like removal of hindrances.
Well, it depends upon how much piti you have.
Okay.
The question is satisfaction, not piti. So if you've got piti but you don't have enough piti, that's not satisfaction and it's not enough piti. But if you have piti and you're satisfied with that piti, that's enough piti now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So always use the scale, not an arbitrary scale that you read in a book or heard somebody talk about, but the scale is the scale of satisfaction.
Okay. You can be like satisfied with just like breathing without like achieving like deep enough concentration or just
Breathing is good.
or like. Okay. So you don't need to aim for like experiencing all the 9 jhanas.
Lust for the jhanas is a major hindrance, as is all lust.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be completely free from the jhanas, from the hindrances.
Okay.
Complete freedom from the hindrances is the first jhana. And along with that is applied and sustained thought, which means you're applying the mind in a state that's free from the hindrances, and then you can sustain that. Part of that has to do with changing those unwholesome thoughts in the hindrances into wholesome thoughts, like I can do this, or wow, this is great. And those are the kind of thoughts then that will lead one to satisfaction. And with satisfaction over and over again, we begin then to develop the next part, which would be the feeling of success. I can do this. Wow, this is good stuff. Now that's the pity right there. Wow, this is so good. But if you say, oh, I feel good, but it's not good enough, that's not even satisfaction. In fact, that thought by itself is a hindrance, and you're nowhere near jhana.
True.
When you have thoughts of it's not good enough, I want more, that's just wanting something you don't have. That's greed, stupid greed, ignorant greed. And every new student goes through that process until they begin to see that they're making that shit up. It's not good enough. You start making up some good shit. And what is good shit? Oh, wow, this is great. I like this. This is good enough. I can see that. That's the way of talking about it.
All right, that's true. But there is like this, the lay Branston. Sorry, I've been like brainwashed by him. So he says like after your breathing stops, you have to focus on the PT. So if you cannot find the
No,
PT, then you have
after the breathing stops, you need to look for an undertaker or a what they call it, a mortician.
to.
So don't hang around funeral pyres when you stop breathing, or you might get roasted. You don't stop breathing, but it gets soft, it gets mellow, it gets easy.
But then, during the retreat, one experience I had the last 3 years, I had like like huge amount of like memories were coming up. Is it like hindrance or is it part of the process?
Exactly. In fact, all of those thoughts that came up, that would be what the Buddha talked about as the first watch of the night. Just one piece of shit after another coming up.
Yes, like
This
deep
me and that
thoughts about
me
the
and another
past.
me and another thought and another thought and another thought. Can you see that process so that you can bring it to a halt? And how we do that is by substituting all of those unwholesome thoughts with a wholesome thought. You can't stop a freighter. You can't stop a great big ship. And in fact, you can't stop an airplane in the middle of the air, but you can steer it. You can't stop the mind, but you can, in fact, steer it. And the way that we want to steer the mind is into wholesome thoughts. And when we can see how we steer the mind into wholesome thoughts, we can see that steering process. And that's when we begin to see the perception, the storytelling. There's not much to this. This is an easy practice. It's not gradual, it's sudden.
So no need to process the past, the traumas.
Pardon?
So there is no need to process the past traumas and memories that come up and are difficult.
Yeah, in fact, that's just digging into the shit now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of just getting out of it. That's one of the major problems with Western meditation, both in the Vipassana and in the Mahasi method. It's just playing with all of that shit rather than throwing it out and putting some wholesome thoughts in.
And how do you do that? Like put all some thought instead.
And it's so simple. It's like you asking the doctor, "How do I take a piss?" And all you have to do is relax.
Just relax.
Mm-hmm. Change those thoughts. They're coming and going and coming and going and coming and going and coming and going by habit. Now, when you begin to change those thoughts, you can see better thoughts coming and going, better thoughts coming and going. And what is a better thought? Oh, this is nice.
Positivity.
All right. So, anybody got anything else? This has been a happy group. Good to see you.
Yeah, I do just want to remark, it's not quite positivity, but we're pointing at reality. This is nice. It's not looking at it in a way that's not true, or how some people might say optimistic. It's just like, it's enjoyable to breathe. That's not perspective of optimism. It's just, yeah, there's pleasure in the breath, and that's okay, and we can enjoy that. It's nice to relax.
Yeah, the story goes that if you don't like your breath, then stop long enough to where the next breath you will like it. Wait 5 minutes. If this breath is not good enough, wait 5 minutes, wait 10 minutes, and then when you breathe, you'll like it. Oh, you'll really like it. So, Mikey, why don't we take this thing home?
Sure thing. All right. Well, thank you, friends, for being here today. This has been an excellent Sangha call. Yeah, this will be posted on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. This is one of those calls that, like Ivan had mentioned, is worth re-listening to. The Buddhadasa was put quite well here. So yeah, go ahead, give it another listen, give it a like, subscribe to the channels, pass this video around, and yeah, continue to make friends here. Really been enjoying seeing people continue to hang here in the Hangout channel here on Discord. And we also invite you to check out OpenSanghaFoundation.org for just all sorts of different resources. So yeah, come make friends in this community and have fun. Take it easy. Be at peace. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Dhammarato.
you.
Dhammarato.
Thank you, Dhammarato.
Great to see you, Dhammarato, and friends.
Good to see you.